over the years, I have participated in an Audubon Christmas count, and the one I participated in the most was in Southeast Houston. Since Houston Parks and Recreation is a sponsor of the Audubon Christmas bird count in Houston, we go to parks, and this particular one goes to Houston Parks east of I-45 and mainly south of I-10. And I really enjoyed seeing how they integrated native habitat into these parks. And there's some new ones that every year it seems like there's a new park they're working on. Of course, we have our local Sylvia Rodriguez Park, which has really expanded over the years. So I called Houston Parks and Recreation and asked them if they would have a speaker for us. And they provided Cassidy's name, and she agreed to speak. And I was delighted to meet her. Cassidy has a BS in ecology and evolutionary biology and a BA in policy studies, both from Rice University. She plans and coordinates habitat restoration projects across the city of Houston. And those are the ones I got to see. I really was impressed. She has worked with TCEQ, Galveston Bay Estuary Program, Houston Arboretum and Nature Center, and of course now, Houston Parks and Recreation Department. She says her favorite aspects of habitat restoration are native plant biology and bird conservation. Her program is responsible to over 16,000 acres of natural area spread across the city of Houston park system. She will discuss the program's approach to protect Houston native ecosystems, urban water quality, and unique wildlife. Primary topics will include prairie restoration projects, the Riparian Restoration Initiative, and the upcoming Nature Preserve Ordinance. She will also discuss growing plant propagation program and new projects that are coming online in relationship with green stormwater infrastructure and linear forest initiative. Please welcome our speaker, Cassidy Kempf.
So thank you for the introduction. I'm really excited to be here to bring you guys in on some of our work and to meet everyone virtually. So yeah, my name is Cassidy Kempf. I'm the park naturalist for the Houston Parks and Recreation Department. I'm in our natural resources management program. Our natural resources manager is Kelly Andrasik. You might be familiar with her. And we work for the city of Houston. So I'll be talking about our approach to urban habitat restoration, conservation, and I hope you guys enjoy it. I just wanted to start off by saying that I lose my voice really quickly, so I'll have to take some water breaks. And I do have a cat who does what she wants, so you might see her. Okay. So just some background on the Houston Parks and Recreation Department. The department was started in 1916 with 2 parks, and now we have over 380 parks and even more green space on top of that. The Parks Department manages over 26,000 acres of parkland. And I just wanted to show you guys this map of our park system so that you can kind of see where everything is and what we're working with. The biggest thing that you'll see here, this is Cullen Park, but it's Addicks Reservoir. It's owned by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and it's managed. We have an agreement that the Parks Department operates it as Cullen Park so that it can also be park space. We don't own that, so it's still a great park, but the largest park that we own is up here to the top right, which is Lake Houston Wilderness Park. This is almost 5,000 acres of natural area. And it's right, you can't see Lake Houston very well in this picture, but it's right at the top of Lake Houston, which is, gave it its name. But for a lot of us, this is our drinking water. So it's really great that we have this huge chunk of natural area right at the end of that watershed. Some other parks you might recognize, we have Memorial Park here with the Arboretum. Herman Park is here. But we have some other pretty big parks that aren't as well known. This is Keith Wise Park up on the north side. On the northeast side, we have Herman Brown Park. It's really large, and Brock Park right here. So I just wanted to orient you guys to what we're working with. Down here, this is Sylvan Rodriguez. So for you guys, this might be the park that you have been to. And I'm in the Natural Resources Management Program. This program was only recently created in 2014. So a lot of what we're still doing right now is growing the program into what we think it should be. And our job is to oversee all natural areas and city parks. So one of the first things that we did when the program started was to do a natural area inventory of all of our parks, and we mapped where we actually have patches of natural area. So we knew what we were working with, where it was located. Some parks don't have any natural area. Some parks are mostly natural area, like this is West 11th Street Park. And some of them have just these patches here and there. So we did an inventory, which was really helpful. We also address any wildlife issues that arise. We go out and see when there's fish kills and wildlife that might need rescuing, things like that. And we have a very large focus on habitat restoration projects and bringing native plants back into our parks. So I'll be talking about that a lot today. So that's just some background on our program. We have 4 main goals that I've kind of broken this discussion out into. So these are the 4 sections of my presentation today. We do a lot of different projects, but I would say most of them relate to one of these 4 goals. So we're wanting to conserve parkland that contains quality habitat, and that's providing ecosystem services for our city and our park system. We want to restore habitat quality in any of our natural areas that have been degraded over time. We are really interested in reforesting our riparian corridors and other projects for improving water and air quality. So first, we'll talk about conserving our parkland. So this is definitely the most important first step to do, because once a natural area has been degraded in any way or developed, it's much harder to bring it back than it is to protect it in the first place. So this is a huge goal for us. And I just wanted to look at a case study of how some of our parks have been developed over time. So this is FM Law Park. This orange is the parcel of land that the city of Houston owns. This is over 300 acres. It's definitely one of our bigger parks. We don't have very many parks that are over 300 acres. And this park is on both sides of Sims Bayou. So it's really great from a natural resources perspective that we have land on both sides of the bayou, and that we can potentially reforest and do a lot of habitat improvements that would really improve the water quality of the bayou right here. So it's a great location and a great size. I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the different interests that our parkland has and what we kind of end up with at the end. So we've got city facilities. This is the police station. Infrastructure for utilities is a big one. Golf courses are pretty well known for their substantial land footprint, for sure. Ball fields are a very important goal for our department, that we really want to provide people areas to play sports and recreate. Stormwater detention. So this little piece right here would have been the detention requirement for putting in this facility. So whenever you are adding a facility to a park, you not only have to consider the footprint of land for your facility and for your parking lot, but also for your stormwater detention. And then parking lots. People have to have a place a way to get to your park. So this is what we have at the end now. And you can see this park still has a lot of natural area left. I believe this is still over 100 acres, which is really great, not something that we have in a lot of our parks. But just based on the shape of what we're left with, our natural area is very fragmented. It's all in all these weird shapes all around, and the habitat quality would be much better if it had been left in one section altogether and less fragmented. And then just the placement of some of these features is a little unfortunate with that utility easement going right along the bayou right there, where we would normally love to reforest that section. So now one of our goals for the department moving forward is that we can have a natural resources voice when making decisions on where to put these in park, where to put facilities into parks, so that we can be left with a kind of a better situation. So one of the biggest tools that we've come up with to conserve our natural areas and parks is our Nature Preserve Ordinance. So this is still a draft document. It still has to go to City Council to become an actual official city ordinance, but we have written it, and there are definitely plans to bring it to City Council soon. So we went through all of our parks and selected the parks with the most significant natural resources that we felt it would be a huge loss if any of these natural areas were to be developed. So we were looking for endangered ecosystems, that mostly being parks with any remnant Gulf Coast prairie. Important water resources were definitely considered, parks along bayous, and rare plant and wildlife populations were definitely looked at as well. So we ended up with 26 parks with over 7,000 acres that are proposed to be included in this ordinance. And we're really excited about it. The ways that a nature preserve section would be treated differently is that development would be restricted. And we have only allowed a couple things. So trails, benches, signage, so interpretive signs about the nature preserve, and lighting, but it has to be bird friendly and wildlife friendly lighting. And then park visitors would have slightly different rules while being in a nature preserve. So there would be no walking outside of our designated trail systems, and no mountain biking. So we definitely want the user experience in a nature preserve to be a little bit more gentle. This is where our nature preserves have distributed themselves throughout the city. I think we got a pretty good spread. This is Sylvan Rodriguez down here, Lake Houston up at the top, and then 24 others kind of spread around town. So we're really excited about this. And once the ordinance gets passed, we'll have a map of where all the nature preserves are on our website, and so that people can go see them, and it will definitely be something that people want to go and look at all of our different nature preserves that we have selected. So I think it's going to be great, and we'll have more information on our website when that comes out. So the second goal is to restore habitat quality in our degraded natural areas. We definitely have a lot of natural area that has invasive species problems and needs some help. So I'll go into that next. So whenever we start a habitat restoration project, we definitely look at our historical reference for what we're working with. And this is a great image of Hall's Bayou in 1944. And this really shows the two different main ecosystem types that we're working with in the Houston area, which is a riparian buffer around Hall's Bayou. So here in this image, I measured it out, and it's between 300 to 600 feet on either side of the bayou of a forested buffer. And then all away from the bayou, you have your Gulf Coast Prairie pothole wetland matrix ecosystem. So this is really fun to look at, just these very stark potholes, which are just depressional wetlands that are only slightly below the ground level of the rest of the prairie, but that hold water for a good chunk of the year and have a totally different plant community than the rest of the prairie. So this is definitely one of the reasons why the Gulf Coast Prairie is so known for its huge plant diversity, because at all of these different elevations that we're seeing, there would be a different plant community, even on the edge of the pothole, inside the pothole, on the top, all different plant communities. So that's one of the reasons why our prairie is so significant. But usually, if we are interested in restoring habitat in a park, if it's along a bayou, we typically do a reforestation project, and if it's away from the bayou, we typically do a prairie restoration. And this same image now, I'll go to what it looks like today. So this part of that was Keepwise Park, and the rest of it has become part of Houston. So this is Hall's Bayou right here, and then where it curved is right here in the park. So for most of Hall's Bayou in this direction, we've totally lost our riparian forest, and we've still got it in the park, which is great. And in this whole image, we've definitely lost our prairie ecosystem. So there would have been some prairie in this part of the park farther away from the bayou. It has transitioned into forest over time. Something that happens when prairies are not managed. It's actually a pretty healthy pine forest, which is better than tallow. And so part of the prairie has been transitioned to forest. A lot of it's been developed into these neighborhoods. Some of it was transitioned into this stormwater detention complex. So this is really interesting to see that same image now, and to really highlight why it's so important to do habitat restoration in the city and to bring back native plants. So I wanted to spend a lot of time on our project at Sylvan Rodriguez because this is so close to y'all's neighborhood. And this is again before and after. So in 1944, this was definitely a prairie site. We have Hall's Bayou, not Hall's, Horsepen Bayou on the north, and then this is a tributary to Horsepen Bayou. The riparian areas have already been altered by now. You can see Horsepen's really straight, and there are no riparian forests here. But aside from that, the prairie area within the park is still intact at this point. I don't think there's a single tree in this whole park. And it's got this great hydrology here with these lower areas, and that actually still, a lot of that still exists in the park today. It was not flattened. So this is what the park turned into before we started the restoration project. So the prairie plants were shaded out by Chinese tallow. Probably 80 to 90% of this tree canopy that you're seeing is Chinese tallow. And when we went to see this park, when it still looked like this, the ground cover vegetation still had a lot of native prairie plants. So we were seeing Indian grass, goldenrod, gara, underneath the tallow, and on the edges that was, waiting to see sunlight again. So we were really excited to start restoring this project. It's about 70 acres. And we've been doing it in phases. So this is phase 1 at Sylvan Rodriguez. We did this chunk of forest first. It was about 20 acres, I think. And we removed the tallow with a hydroax contractor. So it was chipped right where it was. And it was a pretty fast process. And then we came back in with native prairie plants, live plants, and seed. We typically plant perennials and seed for annuals. So the before and after is very stark. It was very woody, overgrown, lots of tallow, and now it's completely opened up. That annual wildflower mix that we did really had a big bloom in the first growing season, and this phase one was really exciting for us because it looked so great. So then we chipped phase one in 2019, and then in 2020 we were able to remove the tallow in phase two. So you can see this section here, which used to be this section, was removed, and this section here was removed. This section actually had a good amount of native trees, and so we did leave those. And it's kind of providing a different sort of area. It'll still be a grassland, but with a little more shade, and it's kind of providing a little bit of an ecosystem diversity here now, which is exciting. And so we really added a lot more to the prairie just recently in 2020. And you can see the difference between phase one and phase two, whereas phase one here has had a whole growing season, and phase two has not yet had a growing season yet as prairie. So they're a year offset, which is really interesting to watch. And the historic seed bank has really been blossoming since we have chipped phase one, and we've been able to watch every time it felt like we went out, we were seeing new plants that we did not plant there and we did not seed. They were coming up completely on their own, which is really a benefit of doing a project like this, where we saw that the prairie plants were still there underneath the tallow. So we've seen the top left is the leatherflower, those tons of snow on the prairie, which is the top middle. Gara over on the right, green milkweed, lots of green milkweed, Agellinus. And so this has been really fun to see that historic seed bank come back. And we've had a lot of other things come back too, which is our invasive species. And definitely anytime that you have open ground is really an invitation for these guys to come in. So we have a good amount of Chinese tallow. I did pick an area that has a lot for this picture to demonstrate. The whole thing doesn't look like that, but we have been herbiciding the Chinese tallow seedlings as they come up. We've got an emerging McCartney rose problem, and definitely very concerned about our vasi grass problem. We are trying to really stay ahead of these invasives because we want to give our native prairie plants a chance to come in and get established. So these are our challenges, but we're definitely going to take care of them. And that's a lot about Sylvan, but we do have 4 other prairie restoration projects. Some of these are older than our project at Sylvan. Hobart Taylor Park and Clinton Park. These are smaller prairies from 7 to 10 acres. And we actually restored these from open lawn areas, which is a lot of different of a process. Lawn grass is definitely a different experience to work with than a tallow area. But these are about 5 or 6 years old and they're doing great. And then Robert T. Stewart Park and Blackhawk Park were also had a lot of invasive woodies, and we're doing some prairie restoration there. And Blackhawk Park is not too far from the Clear Lake area. This natural area is still kind of hidden in the back. We're leaving a forested buffer around it right now to prevent ATVs and things from driving in at the moment, but the prairie is in there if you're ever at this park. And Robert C. Stewart is also, it's along Sims Bayou, kind of on the south side of town. So we support all of our prairie restorations with our prairie plant propagation program. We have a greenhouse at Memorial Park where we have master naturalist volunteers every other week. And we have our greenhouse staff that propagates our plants. We collect seed locally from remnant prairie sites around Houston, and we go with the Katy Prairie Conservancy, which are really great partners for seed collecting. And we have 3 lath houses around town where it's a shade structure, tables, and irrigation to store some of our plants once they've been bumped up into gallon sizes. So we have a lath house in Clear Lake where we put a lot of plants that are targeted to go into Sylvan Rodriguez. And we have volunteers there also. I'll put up the volunteer information soon in one of the next slides, but our plant propagation program is a huge part of our habitat restorations because our live plants are really successful. Sometimes seeding with the coastal prairie mix can be somewhat unreliable if the site's really wet or if there's just bad conditions for seed to come up. Using native plants is really reliable, and we've put thousands and thousands of plants into Sylvan. So the target species that we grow, like I said earlier, are perennials because we find that annual seed does really well just thrown out into the sites. So we grow a lot of rattlesnake master, Texas coneflower, and liatris for our forbs, but we definitely try to diversify as much as possible. And then we try to grow as many grasses as we can, but a large volume of our grasses is yellow Indian grass, switchgrass, little blue stem, big blue stem, kind of your main prairie plants. And then we definitely have a focus on species that like more of a wet prairie because Sylvan Rodriguez is such a wet prairie and a lot of our plants go there. So sugarcane plume grass, eastern gamma grass, and the switchgrass are definitely focuses. So these are our volunteer opportunities. We would love to have volunteers. Definitely put in the chat if you're already one of our volunteers. I think I saw some names that I recognized. We're at the Clear Lake Lath House on the second Wednesdays, and we're also at Sylvan Rodriguez on the second Wednesdays. So there's a plant propagation group and a field planting group that happen at the same time. And my email will be on the last slide, but if you ever want to volunteer, you can email me to register. And we really couldn't do this without our volunteers because these live plants are so important to our restorations, and we have volunteers that help us grow, and then we have volunteers that help us plant. So we're really thankful for that. So the next goal is to reforest our riparian corridors. And this is something that we have a huge focus on right now. So I'll talk about this for a little bit. So our Riparian Restoration Initiative was announced in 2020. The mayor announced that the Parks Department would be reforesting all parks that are next to bayous. So we went through and identified all of those parks. We ended up with over 70. And our goal is to put a riparian buffer in all 70 by 2030. So we've done 12. We did 9 just last year. And depending on how big the park is, there can be anywhere from 250 to 3,000 trees to create a riparian buffer in our parks. So I wanted to show you our Sims Bayou project because we've done a lot of work on here on Sims so far. And the orange parks are the ones that are along the bayous, and the purple are our other parks. And so along Sims, we have already completed Milby, Glenbrook, Charlton, Reveille, Robert C. Stewart. And then we just got funding over the next 2 years to complete Law, Sims Bayou, Margaret Jenkins, and Townwood. So once we're done with that grant, then we'll have all of our parks along Sims Bayou completed. And we've been doing that with the help of the Student Conservation Association. And a lot of these grants on Sims are from TCEQ because they are so important for water quality. And the reason that we, want to reforest all of our riparian buffers is because they're so important for water quality. They're filtering the urban runoff as it flows through our parks before it enters the bayou. It's cleaner water. If we get to plant trees really close to the edge of the water, once the trees get bigger, that shade over the waterway drops the water temperature, and that's really important for water quality. We can reduce erosion and make our banks stronger. And then it's a huge habitat improvement. So a lot of the wildlife in the bayou really benefits from having that forested habitat. And a lot of times we're turning lawn grass into habitat areas, which is a huge improvement. So we have two different types of riparian restorations. We have a creation site and an enhancement site. So creation is when we're going from that open lawn to a forest. We plant our trees 10 feet apart. And in enhancement, it's already a forested natural area, but you can see here we've removed all of the glossy privet and the Chinese privet, piled it up on the edge here. That would be the first step, and then go back in and plant with natives. So these are typically the two different scenarios that we're working with. And this is a before and after of Milby Park, that first one that we did along Sims Bayou. You can see here, this is how a lot of our parks look with this really open lawn so close to the water. And so we came into this park. It's quite a long restoration project, and it was over 2,000 trees. So this is a very long linear park. And the before and after of having this bare lawn right next to the water to having this healthy, filled in riparian buffer is really fun to see. And we're supporting these projects with our tree farm. This is a new facility we created in 2019. And it's really going to support a lot of our tree planting goals. And we're spending time right now teaching staff and learning how to propagate some of our native tree species. We're really targeting species that are not as commercially available so that we can increase our diversity as much as possible. So some of the trees that we are able to buy and don't have as much of a problem with are some of these common species that you see in tree nurseries. So oaks, American sycamore, pecans, redbud, bald cypress. These are all really great, important riparian tree species. But we definitely want to have a larger diversity than this. And so we're looking to propagate some more uncommon species like the hawthorns, little hip hawthorn, parsley hawthorn, black cherry, red mulberry, where we can definitely make sure that it's a true red mulberry and not a hybrid. Barkleberry, just some of these diversity species we're really interested in growing and using our tree farm for that. And then some of our last projects that I'm going to go over are about urban water and air quality. This is a big topic recently, and the city has recently come out with our climate action plan and our resilience plan. And so a lot of this work folds into those kinds of things. We've done a lot with green stormwater infrastructure recently. We've done research on standards for constructed stormwater wetlands for the future in our parks. If we do install any stormwater wetlands, how to make them as friendly for wildlife as possible. So slope, the depth, and design elements like rookery islands, the best native plants to use in these situations. And we've also been researching a lot on bioswale maintenance. We adopted around 20 bioswales from Public Works for a year in 2020. And we planted each one with different native plants. And we were able to find out which native plants worked the best and how much staff time was needed to maintain these bioswales, so that in the future, when we have our own bioswales, we know exactly what we need to do. And we just got funding to put in some of our own bioswales, so we're definitely going to put that knowledge to use. And then this is the last project that I'll go over, but this is our linear forest initiative. We are targeting all available medians in the city of Houston to densely forest. And the goal of this is to reduce urban heat island effects along roadways and to deal with all of that heat from the pavement, and to increase the overall canopy cover of the city. And a big positive will be to reduce the mowing of our medians and corresponding emissions related to mowing. And we have started going through, like you can see in this picture, and mapping available medians and getting sizes, so we know how many trees we're going to need, and we can start making plans. We started planting medians this year. I believe we've done about somewhere between 10 to 15 so far. Each median gets a lot of trees because they're very densely forested. So I'll show you some pictures. We plant our trees 5 feet apart to achieve closed canopy as soon as possible. And you can see here these different rainbow colors in the soils. You really notice when you start to dig, and that tells us that, as we could have guessed, medians are not the most hospitable places for trees, but we definitely need them and want them in these medians. And so we're definitely going for some of our hardier tree species that can do really well in this hot median environment with this mystery soil, and we're really excited to see how it goes. So that was all the projects that I wanted to tell everyone about. And this is our email that you can send any additional questions to. If you're interested in volunteering, definitely email me. And that's all.
Thank you so much. This is Helen again. And as you saw in the chat box, you do have some volunteers here that are interacting with you. So I think that's wonderful.
Oh, good. Hello, volunteers.
Yeah. I have been to Millbury Park too. And one time I went there and I was shocked at all the trees that were there that weren't there before. It's great burning.
Yeah, yeah.
The first question that came up was burning the prairies to maintain the prairies, because that's what the Native Americans did for thousands of years. So is that a possibility, or is that just totally off the?
Yeah, it'll really depend on the site. We just, you know, I don't know if yes, we want to. The Houston Arboretum just recently burned. I don't know if you saw that, but they were able to burn part of their park. And definitely it's a huge, it would be a really big asset to our prairie maintenance to be able to burn. It'll be different for each site. Silver and Rodriguez is like touching an airport. So, you know, you have to think about things like that, but we definitely, that's in our immediate, you know, goals, is to investigate the feasibility of burning at as many prairies as we can.
Got a technical question with the Chinese tallow making a mulch. Her question was, what are the issues with the native plant seeds getting through that mulch? Is there Chinese tallow mulch?
Yeah, so we have seen that there were some small patches where the tallow mulch was too thick. But for the vast majority of the area, it was a pretty thin layer of mulch. And the plants have not had any issues coming up in the mulch. So that was really good. Some areas it was too thick and we did have to rake it out. And we still have some bald spots. So that's a good question.
I know, it's a nice technical question. I liked it. One of the questions was, what type of trees do you use in those mediums, since you made a big point that had to be able to handle heat? And I don't know if you have water lines that go through there or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have a median tree list that I got from, we do have foresters that have been working for the city for their whole career and know what trees do well on the medians. So I got lists from them about which ones do the best. And I'm trying to think, because some of it's kind of a catch-22, because some of our hardiest tree species are also not the best for medians because they're fast growing, they drop limbs, they're messy. So you want ones that are acceptable to put in a median that won't have that dropping limb problem, but you also want them to be drought tolerant and not some of these, like we wouldn't put trees that really like wet conditions in our medians. So it's kind of like an opposite list from our riparian. A lot of our riparian tree lists really like the wet conditions. So we flip it, but we have a native tree list that's got over 90 species. And we choose from that.
Thank you. There's a question that I've actually had a lot of times, is how close to plant the trees, because I've noticed in some places the trees are really planted close together. In other places there's more room and they're actually planted in a line. So do you have, I assume you have a process.
Yes. So the reason, so in our riparian reforestations, we plant trees 10 feet apart. In the medians, we plant trees 5 feet apart. Both of those numbers are small. They're close together in both settings. The reason, there's many reasons. So one is the trees are so close together that they feel competition amongst each other. So they want to grow up faster. They, have this, they're searching for their own sun. So you can achieve a closed canopy faster because you've got all this natural competition. Another one is that, yes, some of the trees will die. They can't all live that close together. But you're left with the ones that won the competition. So it's kind of a way to end up with the best of the group, and they grew faster. They, if you plant really far away, there's so much sun at the beginning for invasives to come in and to shade everything out. So the game is to really close your canopy as soon as possible. And why do we plant them in a line? I saw that in the chat too. A lot of the times it's to allow us to mow in between our plantings for the first couple of years. Even though they're trees, they can be outcompeted by herbaceous vegetation like grasses, things that you wouldn't think could outcompete a tree, but they compete for root space, they compete for sun. So we really like to mow in between the trees until they're established enough to compete for themselves. And so doing them linearly allows for that, for the mowing process.
Thank you. This is a question that she's actually sent in twice to make sure we got it. She said, how was the restoration on grassy areas different? What are the different types of grasses and how did you figure out what to do?
Okay. So there's a different site prep. So if we're starting in a forested area, then you start with a hydroax contractor, which is very expensive. So sometimes starting from a lawn is a little bit less expensive from the start. Usually we herbicide the lawn grass. There's a couple ways to get rid of lawn grass, but if you're trying to do like a 10-acre prairie restoration, you definitely want to make sure that you're trying to kill the grass as much as possible. So we usually start with herbiciding the grass. And then in a woody type restoration scenario, you have all of the seeds of whatever tree used to be there still in the ground. So all of those tallow seedlings that were coming up aren't a problem in a lawn situation because that seed bank was not there. Another thing is that some lawn grasses are pretty invasive. So if you don't get a good kill on your first herbicide application, then your prairie plants are competing with lawn grass. So a lot of things about it are quite different.
There's another question, what plants you put in your bioswales?
Well, this is what we've been learning through that project. So we designed it by pairing a grass and a forb and doing a different pairing for each bioswale so that we could see which ones survived. We were worried that because bioswales have an engineered soil that some of our plants wouldn't do well. And we didn't have any of our plants die because of the engineered soil. They all did relatively well. We found that inland sea oats was one of our best plants performance-wise in the bioswales, because one thing that you do want as the water is going through, you want like your native plants to have a dense formation so that they're trapping things, which is the whole point. So some of we tried everything. So like we had some, I think like Indian plantain. It's got this like small rosette down at the bottom and this like really tall flower. So it's like a stalk. And we quickly realized that, you want something that's more vegetative down by the ground and more of a netting that traps this water. So we really I think the blue mist did well. The inland sea oats did really well. A lot of our grasses, muley was good. And then it also depended on the location because some of them were right under these big live oaks and were like completely covered in leaves, like a lot of the time. So a lot of the maintenance on those was removing leaves. And if we didn't remove the leaves fast enough, then the plants would get shaded out and die. So it was a lot of learning, but those were our best species for sure.
Another question was, you had mentioned wildlife as you've done this restoration. What kinds of wildlife have you seen?
Well, that's a fun part of it. So we do a quarterly bird survey, Kelly and I, at Sylvan. And, when we write our grants, they say, guess what wildlife you'll bring by like writing this. And so a lot of times we say, we're going to bring grassland dependent birds that like have no habitat left, and we're going to bring them in. And then we've been seeing them, which is really exciting. So there's tons of sparrows at Sylvan. We've seen, there's a harrier that's been flying around lately. There's scissor-tail flycatchers. So there's a vermilion flycatcher there now, and they've seen the grass and they've come to the site, and so that's awesome. It's really good for reptiles too. And my boss is a herpetology person. I'm more of a bird and plant person, but she's really excited about some of the stuff going on at Sylvan and our other restoration sites. A lot of at Milby, I noticed our first riparian restoration we did. like a huge amount of dragonflies come in. It's right on the bayou. And they like to, they like a little stick to land on. So once we planted our trees, it was like every tree had like one grasshopper sitting at one dragonfly sitting at the very top. And there was tons of different species. So there's always fun wildlife that shows up.
And what about reptiles? You mentioned snakes.
Yes. Sylvan Rodriguez is a snake park. If you're a snake person, I would suggest going there with rubber boots. And there's tons of snakes there. There always has been. We see snakes at all of our restoration sites. I'm not particular. I don't know a lot of the snake species, but we definitely see them a lot.
And what about mammals? You see more mammals? I know people in the neighborhoods note that they have more mammals coming through their yards.
Yeah, we do see mammals. There's a big deer population at Sylvan Rodriguez. We were getting concerned at the beginning that we were removing the deer habitat when we were taking out the trees, but we're leaving a big tree area around the edge, and we've seen them in the prairie a lot. They haven't seemed to be affected by it, which is great. Possums, raccoons, definitely a lot of mammals too. Oh yeah, and someone said in the chat, rabbits. This is a good place to see rabbits.
There. Another question, I think this will probably be our last question, unless Debbie has gotten some off of Facebook, is understory plants. As you put in your trees, I'm sure you put in understory too.
Yes, so in the medians, we're planting the canopy and the understory at the same time, since we're doing that really close 5-foot spacing. In a lot of our riparian sites, we are doing understory species, but not as much. We're planning on coming back in with understory once the canopy is closed. Sometimes if you start off with too much understory and you have a really sunny spot, their leaves get too much sun and they don't do well. So sometimes it's better to wait until your restoration has taken off a little bit before you put in the understory, so that you have the right shade conditions. But yeah, we put in yaupon, deciduous holly, roughleaf dogwood, like parsley hawthorn, white fringe tree, as many as we can find. We're just all about adding as many species as possible. That definitely sets you up for success.
Yeah, it's also pretty.
Mm-hmm.
I asked you this question before about irrigation on those mediums. I assume you have some kind of irrigation you're using or watering.
We have so the Parks Department's broken up into different sectors, and so the medians in the different sectors have staff with watering trucks, and so they water them. We're only planning on watering any of our plantings for the first 2 years after they're planted, because they're all native, so they don't have permanent irrigation. They'll just be watered until they're established.
So any parting comments you want to make before we close it down?
Thank you to everyone who was here, and I hope that you can come see some of our parks, and that hopefully I taught you something was interesting to you, and really was nice to be able to share. So thank you for having me.
And thank you for all your great work in those parks. I really enjoyed them.
Thank you again as well, Cassidy. It was really an interesting presentation. It's just wonderful to see all the new things going on with our parks, and we all need to get out there and check it out ourselves. It looks like we have some of our members that do go out to Sylvan Rodriguez. So if you haven't been there, I would encourage us to get there. It's the closest one to us.